Welcome to the Mitten Mysteries podcast, hosted by Haileigh Vee.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mitten Mysteries podcast. I'm your host, Haileigh Vee. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you are new here, we like to talk about all things creepy, strange, and unusual. Anything weird that happens here in the Mitten State, this is what we talk about here on this podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you guys go ahead and follow us over on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We are literally everywhere. So if you guys want to follow us over there for extra content, then go ahead and follow us over there on our other social pages. They are all under the Mitten Mysteries. Also, if you could leave us a 5-star review anywhere you're listening from today, that would be amazing. And if you're feeling a little fancy, you can go ahead and leave us a written review telling us what your name is and where you're listening from today and what you love about the show. And one last thing before we get into today's topics is if you guys happen to have any ghost stories or legends or any cool stories that you would like our listeners to listen to, I would love it if you guys would send them to themittenmysteries@gmail.com. So that way I can read them out loud to our listeners and share about stories and topics or legends that maybe a lot of people here from Michigan didn't know about. All right, well, that's enough with the intro. Let's go ahead and get into today's show. Welcome back, everybody. I know it has been a minute since I have posted a podcast, but just so you guys know, we are back into the swing of things. A lot of personal issues had gone on, so I was just trying to take care of those, but we are back and I'm excited and feeling more creative than ever to go ahead and start putting out more podcasts for you guys. And in today's episode, it's very interesting to me, and this has been a topic that living in Michigan, I have always wondered. Since I was little, I have always had like irrational fears with this. If you do happen to follow me over on my TikTok page or Instagram page, you guys will know exactly what topic I'm going to be talking about today, and that is, are there sharks in the Great Lakes? Now you're probably sitting there like, Haileigh, there's no sharks in lakes. There's no sharks in fresh water. And I would say to you, unfortunately, there are some shark species that are able to go into fresh water and stay in there and live there for a little bit of time. So yes, there is a chance that there may be sharks in the Great Lakes, but we're going to talk about that today. So why and how did I ever even think about, this topic? Like, why did I want to make a podcast about this topic? Well, for one, if you follow me over on my socials at Haileigh Vee, you guys will understand I post a lot of videos about sharks, and it's not just because I like posting videos about them. It's because I'm genuinely terrified of them, but I'm also very intrigued by them, and they are just very big, somewhat beautiful creatures, but they are terrifying. And I've always had a fear ever since I was a little kid about sharks. And even when I was swimming in the pool, I would always have that irrational fear that there was a shark in the water. Every time I would close my eyes, I get terrified. So I still kind of have that fear today. I am very afraid of deep, dark water, any murky water, any big body of water. I have irrational fears that sharks or some other big creature are going to get me out of the water. It is also summertime here in Michigan, and I know a ton of people like to go to the Great Lakes for the summertime to go swimming, hang out, beach, do all that kind of stuff. And when I was little, I used to do it all the time with my family. We would go to the west side of the state, go to Muskegon, stay at a little campground over there, go to Michigan Adventures, and then we would also go to Lake Michigan, hang out, go do the sand dunes. And that was our family tradition growing up. So this has always been in my mind, and I want to talk about it, and I want to see if anybody else also relates to this, because anytime I ever talk about it over on TikTok, a lot of people always say I have the same exact fear. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to kind of go over the brief history of the legends and why people are really saying, oh, there's sharks in the Great Lakes, beware, when you go swimming, you never know. So we're going to go over that today. Let's go ahead and get into these facts and a little bit of history about the Great Lakes and see if there are really sharks in the Great Lakes. In the wintertime, the temperatures of this water can get below 32 degrees, and that is very cold for water. Here in Michigan, we have 4 Great Lakes. We have Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, and Lake Erie, but there's also another bigger lake towards the east, a couple states away, and that's Lake Ontario, and that kind of surrounds the New York area and Canada area. The Great Lakes here in Michigan are humongous. These are some very big bodies of water. They are 94,710 total square miles of surface area. So that's a lot of room to swim around if you are indeed a shark in this water. In the summertime, the averages for the water are around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, with the maximum temperature in July being around 73 degrees. A lot of these temperatures do vary though, depending on which lake you go to. Say if you're going to Lake Superior, which is much farther north, and it's also a lot deeper than say Lake Erie is. Lake Erie is the most shallow out of all the Great Lakes, and it's the most southern part of any of the Great Lakes. The reason why the temperatures of these lakes play a big part in whether or not there are sharks in these waters is because a lot of sharks cannot live in freezing cold waters. There's only a couple species of sharks that I know of that are able to survive in cold water for a long period of time, but most of the sharks that are living in the colder temperatures aren't as aggressive as more of the warm water sharks. Now, I am no marine biologist. I do not study these. I don't have a degree or a PhD or anything in sharks or marine life. But just from what I have researched on my own, in those species that I do know of are salmon sharks, port beagle sharks, basking sharks, Greenland sleeper sharks, and black dogfish sharks. There could be a couple more, but those are what I really kind of know about from my own research. Some of the more aggressive sharks can also go into the cold water for a little period of time, and those are like the main aggressive sharks, like the great white shark, the tiger shark, and the bull shark. The only reason why they do end up going into the cooler waters is to find bigger prey items that they may not be able to find in the warmer water. A lot of the reason why sharks are able to survive in the colder water temperatures is by slowing down their metabolism, which allows them to conserve their energy and survive in the colder water when there's less food going around. The colder water sharks also have layers of fat or blubber, which helps to insulate their bodies and keep them warm while swimming through the cold water. When it comes down to thinking logically, if it's a possibility, could sharks live and survive inside of the Great Lakes? There is a possibility that they would be able to conserve their energy, slow their metabolisms down for a period of time, but unless they are those cold water sharks I was talking about before, I personally don't believe that they would be able to survive long enough when there's not very many big sources of food inside the Great Lakes. As it is, it's just smaller fish. There's not really giant whales or anything they could survive on. For them to be able to survive months and months and months of the winter time here in Michigan, I'm not sure if the bigger, more aggressive sharks would be able to keep alive for that period of time. That's just my belief, but then again, I am not a marine biologist, so I am not sure. Now, what I like to think about is how would the sharks, if they are able to survive in the freshwater, such as a bull shark, how would they get from the ocean all the way to the Great Lakes? There's really two paths that these sharks could kind of take. Main paths, I should say. The one path is the Mississippi River. Now this extends all the way down from New Orleans all the way up until Illinois, and then from Illinois it turns into the Illinois River, which then extends all the way up into Chicago area, and that water is kind of like the Chicago taxi waterway, and then that empties into Lake Michigan. From Chicago, Illinois to the New Orleans area, it's around 927 miles, so for a shark to swim that far all the way up to Chicago area, that's a very far distance to travel in between rivers and upstream. Now, is it possible? Yes, everything is possible, but is it likely? I don't think so. The second way any sharks could possibly get into the Great Lakes is by taking the St. Lawrence River from the St. Lawrence Gulf, which is connected to the North Atlantic Ocean. Now, this is a very long journey from the north, going down through Quebec City, then through Montreal, and then you hit through Toronto. Then you would get to Niagara Falls, and the sharks would have to pretty much go down the falls to be able to get into the river. Now, is it possible for a shark to fall through the Niagara Falls and survive and still get into the river? Possibly, but is it likely? I don't think so. Then again, you never know how hungry a shark may be, and they just don't care, obviously, because they can't think like humans do, and they're just gonna think like an animal, and if they smell a scent, they might chase it, and you never know, they could try to go through the falls. What are the first sightings or reports or documentations of actual sharks being inside of the Great Lakes? Rest assured, there's been no scientific documentation of any species of sharks being inside the Great Lakes alive, being caught and documented, but that does not stop the rumors and the reports and sightings, quote unquote, of sharks being in the waters. Now, I have heard tons of stories and read a ton of stories and sightings, but they have all been false rumors and lies about these sharks being in the water. A lot of it is for like tourism and stuff. So yes, there has been no actual sightings or documentation of sharks being inside of the Great Lakes. There's been many cases of people reporting that they saw sharks or pulling sharks out of the water or from the shore when they have just been kind of just dumped there when they've been caught somewhere else. And a lot of them are just like pranks or people just trying to get clout or attention for it. One of the stories that I had come across was this news report from World News Daily Report, WNDR, and they published an article in June 2016 reporting that a fisherman made an outstanding catch pulling a 3,000-pound great white shark out of the waters of Lake Michigan. And the article quotes, "The capture of a 3,000-pound great white shark in Lake Michigan yesterday could explain the disappearance of hundreds of missing people in the region in the last decade, and it has been confirmed by the U.S. Coast Guard this morning. John O'Keefe, a Canadian tourist, captured the 3,000-pound beast while fishing for sturgeon in Lake Michigan." And he quotes, "We reeled in the beast for a good 4 to 5 hours before we finally shot it and wounded it in the head," explains the Toronto resident on vacation. "Luckily, I had my rifle in my hand, or else the prize fish would never have been caught," claims his friend, a longtime resident of Chicago, Alan Brooks. This article also suggested that the great white shark was suspected in a number of unexplained disappearances, incidents, and that supposedly went unreported by the media because they might adversely impact tourism. Because the west side of the state of Michigan is very touristy. If you do live here, you guys understand. It says, authorities suspect that more than 100 people reported missing in the last decade may have fallen under the fangs of the gigantic beast, several local residents even suspecting its presence for a long time. There's a quote from Robert Helm, and it says, "I've owned this campground for the past 17 years, explains the local entrepreneur, and I've had my load of visitors disappearing mysteriously over the years. But I was told not to say anything about it. People would check in, but they wouldn't check out," he recalls. "Nobody ever believed me anyway, and it would have scared away the tourist," he reports to the local reporters. "It would have been bad for business in town," he adds, visibly relieved since the capture of the large creature. However, this report was nothing more than just another fabricated story from the fake news website. Great white sharks cannot swim in freshwater lakes, and the image was used by World News Daily Report to illustrate their fabricated dates to at least 2013, and thus a clearly unconnected to any shark capture occurring in June 2016. The WNDR creates fake and outlandish stories published alongside unrelated photographs, racking up the revenue via social media shares, and the site's disclaimer clearly states that the articles are satirical and fictional. So this rumor of a 3,000-pound great white shark in the Great Lakes was false. There was also another report coming from a man named Rick Fassey, and he was from Traverse City, Michigan, and while he was boating in Lake Michigan, he had come across a 2-foot-long fish, and this fish was dead. It was not alive. He had it identified as a juvenile blacktip shark by an expert from the University of Florida. Now, when he had found this shark, he had suspected it to be a bull shark, but when he had found out that it was a juvenile blacktip shark, he was very surprised. In September of 1937, the patience of Alton, Illinois, anglers Dudge Collins and Herbert Copes was completely exhausted, more times than they cared to count. Something big had destroyed their Mississippi River fish traps while helping itself to a quick, easy meal. They guessed it was an opportunistic giant catfish, so they decided to end its marauding once and for all by setting off a seine net to snare it. When they returned, they found that the trap had apparently worked, and as the net's buoys showed signs of terrific struggle beneath the muddy water surface. What the men pulled up, though, left them shocked and scared. Ensnared in the net was a bull shark that was over 5 feet long and over 84 pounds. For those not familiar with bull sharks, here are a few facts. They can reach 11 feet in length. They are considered by divers to be the second most dangerous shark after the great white. Unprovoked bull shark attacks on humans are not uncommon, and some studies have shown that bull sharks kill more humans per year than any other shark species. These unusual sharks can not only survive in freshwater, but they have been known worldwide to actually prefer it over saltwater. They are common inhabitants or visitors to the rivers that enter the ocean, such as the Ganges in India, the Zambezi in Africa, and our very own Mississippi and its tributaries. Many authorities, presumably wanting to prevent panic among the river's dwellers and water sport enthusiasts, insist that due to the extensive lock and dam system built over the river shortly after the Alton catch, it would now be impossible for a shark to wend its way up the Mississippi River or Ohio rivers. That sounds comforting, but how can the authorities account for the following horror and oddity that occurred in 1955 and 1969, well after the completion of the locks? And this is how the story of that day went. The day was beautiful, and consequently, many were cooling off by boating or swimming in Lake Michigan. Among them was George Lawson, a boy from Chicago who was swimming not too far from a boat off the shore. While splashing and playing, George was abruptly pulled underwater. Upon resurfacing, his screams for help brought John Adler to his rescue. Nevertheless, by the time he was brought to the boat, George's right leg had been severed. The boat's stunned passengers could do little but stare in dumbfounded awe at a large telltale dorsal fin that headed out to deeper water. "I just couldn't believe it, but I had to believe what I saw happening right before my eyes," exclaimed a stunned Adler. Doctors were certain that the boy's injuries were inflicted by a shark, but were unable to explain from whence it came. The second encounter also played out itself in Lake Michigan. Anglers Gil Shamek and Cal Lukowitz literally stumbled upon a second shark specimen, much smaller, but a shark nonetheless. "We saw a seagull sitting on what we thought was a piece of flotsam," recalled Shamek. "When we got closer, the seagull flew away and we saw it was a fish. Cal said, 'Look, it's a sturgeon.' But when we got up to it, we could see it was a shark." The two brought the curiosity home with them, froze it, and eventually they had the identity of their find verified by a museum ecologist as a bull shark. Even though the lake's temperature was a bone-chilling 42 degrees, the ecologist confirmed that it was not too cold for a shark. So with these stories, these are very interesting to me because there's no scientific documentation, but for a boy to be taken to a hospital for having his leg bit off by a supposed shark, you would think that they would document this stuff, but apparently it was not documented, it was not recorded, and it was just kind of blew off, because there's no possible way that a shark could get through, apparently, the dam system that they had put in place after the bull shark was found by those two fishermen in Illinois. So after all the information that we know about the possibility of sharks being able to survive in the freshwater, such as like the bull shark, do I still believe, is there a possibility that sharks can get through all the way from either New Orleans or from the side by Canada? There's a possibility, but I really don't believe that sharks are swimming that far just to get into Lake Michigan. Now, do I think that maybe people could find bull sharks in the Mississippi River and travel with them up here to Lake Michigan and just dump them just for a prank, and then they could survive for a period of time that way? That's something that's a little bit more believable, but for me to sit here and say I think that sharks are thriving in the Great Lakes, I do not believe. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you guys think that there's a possibility that there are still sharks out there? The only other thing that really comes to mind about the possibility of someone maybe sighting a shark or seeing a fin would be from seeing a lake sturgeon. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever seen pictures of lake sturgeon before. The things can get massive and to the size of sharks, like smaller sharks. I've seen pictures of sturgeon that are 10 feet long with huge fins that look like shark fins. So it's pretty easy, I think. If you're in the water and you can't really tell if it's murky and you see that thing swim by you, those are known to travel more towards the top of the water too, so the dorsal fin would be out of the water, and maybe it could be mistaken for a shark. So I could see the possibility of that when people say, "Oh, I seen a shark, in Lake Michigan or Lake Superior or Lake Huron or Lake Erie." That could be a possibility, but I do not think that there are sharks thriving out there in the Great Lakes. What are your guys' thoughts about the sharks being in the Great Lakes? Do you believe, after hearing all these scientific facts about how sharks survive, if they can survive in the fresh water and the cold temperatures, do you believe that there could be possibly sharks swimming up the Mississippi River and the St. Lawrence River to get into the Great Lakes? You guys can follow me over at my socials at Haileigh Vee or at the Mitten Mysteries. You can let me know in my comments down below, or if you're over on YouTube listening, then you can go ahead and put your comments down below in the comments section. And I would love to read your thoughts about this topic. This topic is very interesting to me and I could talk about it all day long. But if you guys did enjoy today's episode, make sure you guys give it a thumbs up if you're over at YouTube, leave a comment down below, subscribe to this podcast if you are not subscribed already, and visit all of our social media channels for more extra content if you guys are interested. I will talk to you guys later in our next episode.